The true story of Giulia Tofana. It was the 17th century. Women were trapped in dreadful marriages. She was the best poison maker of the century. What happened next is beyond everyone's expectations. The city of Palermo was warm and dusty that summer of 1620. Giulia Tofana was born into a world where women had few rights, and men controlled nearly everything. She had no choice: marry, have children, and submit. But Giulia was different. She was smart, determined, and curious, especially about the herbs and remedies her mother used in the shadow of their home. This knowledge would define her life. Giulia, it is said, had witnessed what life for a woman in her time truly meant: oppression, abuse, and a life with no choice. That realization deeply hurt her soul, leading her to a goal that would place her name in history books, even though those books would later be filled with lies about who she really was. It was a stormy night in Palermo, an evening that carried the scent of salt and earth, when Giulia decided to change her plans. The experiments with poisons had been going on for some time, but her first attempt had failed. The man she had tried to poison, her own husband, hadn't processed the poison properly. It hadn't had the lethal effect she had hoped for. This wasn't the first time she had ventured into the deadly mixtures she had developed herself. Giulia had inherited her mother's knowledge, a woman who worked in the ancient traditions of herbs and secrets. Giulia understood that the art of poisoning wasn't just about deadly substances. It had to happen unnoticed, slowly, and it needed to allow a woman to keep living, while the man who had tormented her was slowly removed from the picture. The failed poisoning was her warning. She had to move on, move beyond Palermo, beyond what she had ever known. And the moment came when a new client approached her in her pharmacy, a woman who could wait no longer. She had her own tale of torment and abuse. Giulia decided to go to Rome, seeking a broader network of women, a new opportunity to develop her work further. Rome was a city of power, a city of secrets, where the elite hid their dark desires. Here, she would continue her work. The streets of Rome were filled with the scent of fresh bread and spicy, fragrant herbs, but it was the scent of power that Giulia wanted to bring into the air. She opened a pharmacy in the heart of the city, nestled between the stately buildings and secret networks hidden there. No one would ever suspect that behind the shelves filled with herbs and fragrant oils, a different kind of trade was taking place. The pharmacy was her cover. Women came to her for herbs and remedies for everyday ailments. But Giulia sold something much more dangerous: aqua tofana, a secret poison she had developed herself. It was as clear as water and odorless, so it could easily be mixed into a man's food or drink without anyone suspecting anything. Women would leave with a small bottle hidden in their clothing. The poison was imperceptible and struck slowly, and that was exactly what Giulia wanted. It shouldn't seem immediate, but it had to be final. Her pharmacy became quickly popular, especially among women struggling in violent marriages, women who silently hoped for an escape. They came, not with words, but with gestures, with a look that said, "Help me." In the shadows of her shop, Giulia built a small army of women, each with their own stories and reasons for standing by her side. She worked with women who had the necessary trust to keep her secrets, women who had ignited their own survival instincts in a society that didn't support them. For them, Giulia wasn't a criminal, but a savior. They provided the means, produced the aqua tofana in the back rooms of the shop, and silently spread it, as if they were part of a secret organization. It was the women who made the work possible, who gave the poisons to the clients, and were always on the lookout for curious eyes from the outside. Every woman who entered her shop had her own reason for seeking Giulia. Some rarely spoke about their problems, while others simply cry. There was always a code. Giulia didn't speak directly about the poison, but every woman knew exactly what she was seeking. If the right gestures were made, a smile or a quick gesture with the hand, The toxic water would be discreetly handed over. It was wrapped in bottles, often in a piece of cloth or a small bag. There were no words, just a stifling silence that underscored the secret of the poison. Giulia Tofana had created a masterpiece. Aqua Tofana was no simple poison, but a carefully formulated substance that would slowly and painlessly exhaust its victims, so that no one would notice until it was too late. The poison worked in a cunning way. It was odorless and colorless, making it perfect for women who could hide it in the daily life of their husbands. At first, it seemed harmless. A bit of a headache, some stomach trouble, fatigue. But, as time passed, the effect started to reveal itself. The poison attacked the nervous system, caused nausea, and diminished the man's vitality, making him feel weaker day by day, without understanding why. His stomach was always upset, his muscles stiff, his mood grimmer than ever. Giulia had refined the poison so that the symptoms could easily be attributed to other, less dangerous conditions. It wouldn't immediately lead to sudden death, like some poisons. No, the power of Aqua Tofana was that it immersed its victim in a slow, ever-deepening exhaustion. The man might feel tired for weeks, even months, until his body couldn't take it anymore. And then, one day, death would come. Often during an ordinary meal or drink. The poison had done its work without ever being seen. The woman who administered it had saved her own life, without anyone ever washing her hands in blood. The power of Aqua Tofana lay in its complete unobtrusiveness. Even the cleverest doctors couldn't recognize it as poisoning. Giulia had found a clever way to hide her work, and that made it so much more powerful. Her clients didn't have to administer a dangerous dose all at once, like with other poisons. It was a subtle attack on the body, causing the victim to feel completely lost in the murky fog of their own health. And yet, things went wrong for Giulia. It all started one quiet evening in the elegant home of a woman who, despite her rich status, was trapped in a marriage that had broken her. Her husband, an arrogant nobleman, had abused her for years, both mentally and physically. But now, she had found the strength to claim her freedom in her own way. Her choice was simple. The Aqua Tofana Giulia had given her would help her escape. That evening, she made soup for her husband, the soup that would mark his end. She carefully added the poison, just as Giulia had taught her. One drop in the dish, almost imperceptible, just enough to slowly weaken the man. It wasn't meant to kill him immediately. It was never intended to do that. It had to work quietly, unnoticed. But her nerves got the better of her. In her haste, in her fear, she accidentally knocked over the bottle of Aqua Tofana, spilling much more into the soup than she had intended. When her husband ate the meal that evening, it began to take effect immediately. His throat burned, his face contorted in pain. He fell to the floor, gagging, and the woman looked at him in panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. His death came quickly, much faster than the woman had expected. The poisoning struck hard, and his body collapsed. It was too late to pull back, too late to fix her mistakes. But what the woman hadn't foreseen was that her panic would cloud her judgment. In her fear of being discovered, she did something unthinkable. She called in her maid, someone she trusted. However, the maid had a different agenda. She had heard the rumors about Giulia Tofana and the secret of the poison. Instead of showing pity, she decided to save herself. She went to the authorities and revealed the secret of the poison soup. Giulia's network was exposed in an instant. The betrayal was complete. Her pharmacy, her secret work, everything was discovered by the maid, who placed her own fear of her husband above her loyalty to her mistress. The knock on the door came unexpectedly. The soldiers stood there, armed with the threat of the Inquisition. Giulia had no chance to escape. She was arrested, detained, and interrogated, but she revealed no names. The women who had helped her, the women who had trusted her, stayed in the shadows. She said nothing. Even when the torture began, she remained silent. Unfortunately, some women were arrested, whose husbands had recently died under mysterious circumstances. Julia knew her time had come. Whatever happened, her work had achieved its goal. Her legacy would live on, but not in the way she had hoped. Julia Tofana was sentenced. She would be brutally executed, publicly punished for her actions. But the punishment for the women who had helped her, the women who had purchased her poison, was even more gruesome. Most were arrested, beaten, and some were executed, while others had to live with the sword of shame hanging over them, behind the bars of the secret society Julia had created. But history would speak of Julia Tofana differently. Even as she lost her life, the secrets of her water would live on, in the hearts of the women who fought for their freedom. We want to thank you for listening to the story of Julia Tofana. This story exceeds everyone's expectations. What did you think of this true story? Are you curious about the next story? Then be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything.